And then someone responds saying, that was quite possibly just a police tactic to get him to talk. Most suspects don't talk if they think that everyone else involved isn't talking, like looking out for each other. But if the suspect believes everyone is blaming it on him, then he is likely to break that loyalty and make a statement. And the OP responds saying, this is certainly a possibility. The confession that was provided to me had enough details that made me think it was authentic. However, I suppose I could have been tricked. And then the commenter responds to the OP saying, not sure if the police are allowed to lie to the extent of faking a confession. Although for a case as serious as murder, perhaps they would, especially if they knew you were involved for sure. Also, interrogation techniques have improved a lot in recent years. Police used to run riots saying and doing whatever they wanted to obtain a confession. And then someone replies saying, don't be so naive. The police are absolutely allowed to lie to you. That's why you shouldn't talk to them without a lawyer, especially if you were involved. OP got lucky these cops actually wanted to know the truth. And then another commenter asked a question saying, what happened to your girl? And the OP responded saying, this is actually a fun bit. I later found out that she told everyone I was delusional and that we had never been dating. I guess it wasn't really a match made in heaven. She ended up in a mental institution, which was probably a good place for her to be. I am evidently attracted to unstable women, except wifey, who is only somewhat quirky. I pimped out high school girls for 2 years. One of them was my sister. Ask me anything. Of all the bad things I did back in my drug-using, partying days, this has to be the worst. When I was in my early 20s, I dated a high school freshman, and whether it was just because of my influence or whether there were other factors in play, I'll never know. But she was a really screwed up girl. I didn't care. Back then, all I cared about was booger sugar, pills, partying, and effing. Mary was into all of that, but there was a problem. We didn't have much money. She was just a kid, and I barely made $250 a week at my shitty landscaping job. One day, I had her with me while picking up some pills, and the dealer, stoned as fuck, told me he'd give us 2 extra pills if she slept with him. It took some convincing, but Mary eventually agreed, and that was the first time I pimped a girl out. She wasn't the only one or the one I most regret. Like I said, Mary was a screwed up girl before I met her. I'm not saying I didn't make things worse for her, but I'm positive what ended up happening to her wasn't entirely my fault. The ones I regret most aren't even the friends she helped me recruit from her school after Mary became a proper escort. Most of them were also sort of crazy already, or else Mary wouldn't have been able to convince them to work for me. The one I regret most is my sister. She was 15 the first time she asked me for drugs. Just weed, which I had plenty of, but I convinced her it cost 10 times what it did. Keep in mind, I was on something practically all the time at this point, and had grown used to seeing young women as a means to make cash. I was absolutely without remorse or guilt. So she paid with saved up allowance money, something like $100 for 2 joints. Eventually, I brought her to her first rave and even paid for everything, including the pills. While she was rolling hard, I told a friend of mine to massage her, and when she began to complain that he was touching her too much, I told her to stop being a baby and just enjoy it. I watched my sister lose her virginity that night to a guy I barely remember anymore. He paid me $100 later for that. It wasn't long before she became my constant companion at parties, raves, and even clubs. Our parents were trying to control her, by grounding her, but I convinced her to sneak out all the time. She and my two main girls, including Mary, would go out and get high, and then I'd hook them up with someone. I would take the majority of the money, and they never complained because they were scared of me for a couple of reasons. They were scared I might hurt them because, yes, I barely remember doing so, but while booger sugared out, I was known for getting violent. They were also scared whenever I threatened to leave them or cut them off. They saw me do that to a few of their friends, and they didn't want that to happen. This went on for 2 years. It ended after my sister was arrested for possession and solicitation. I'd had the bright idea that my girls should be getting their own Johns, so I started bringing them to clubs where I knew the bouncers and send them in to find customers for their services. It worked well for a few short weeks until my sister got caught up in a police raid. They arrested dozens of people that night, my sister included, but she was by far the youngest. After that, only Mary remained of my girls. The rest were scared now, and my sister was in a drug treatment center. I tried getting some of them back, even some of the ones I'd gotten rid of before, but I was circling the drain and they seemed to know it. Suddenly, I wasn't the cool older guy, I was the loser druggy guy. What finally got me to change was the day I brought Mary over to one of my dealer's friend's place. This friend was supposedly really into young redheads and would pay $300 for some fun with her. My dealer vouched for him, but I brought Mary there myself anyway because I wanted the money. I was back to being broke and I needed cash desperately, so I brought her to this sketchy neighborhood and walked her to the door. Funny thing is, Crazy Mary was for once nervous and suggested we forget about this dude. I insisted though, and by now she always listened to me. When we entered the room, I knew something was off. There were 3 guys there, and they had flashlights. They said something about the power being off, and I stupidly believed them enough to let them lead me into the main room. Mary was freaking out by this point, probably because she realized what I hadn't. This house wasn't theirs. Hell, it was an abandoned house. No furniture, total mess, all fucked up. Before all that registered to me, I was attacked. They beat the shit out of me. I barely remember any of it. I do remember being strapped into a gurney and hearing a paramedic say that my lung was punctured. Turns out he was wrong, but I was in enough pain to believe it. I spent the next few days in the hospital being treated for a variety of things, including a concussion that required them drilling a hole in my skull, broken ribs, a broken hand that never healed correctly, and of course, H withdrawal. When the police spoke with me, I refused to answer any questions until they asked me if I knew that my friend Mary had been assaulted as well. I remember feeling, and I still feel, the shame of realizing I had never even considered what happened to her. Turns out she had been violently R-worded while I was unconscious. They beat the hell out of her too. I think that's the first time I honestly felt guilt about what I've been doing for nearly 2 years. Not even my sister getting arrested had been enough to make me realize what an asshole I was, but being shown the pictures of Mary's face, all swollen and bruised, made me cry like a girl. I told the police everything about my dealer friend and how he'd set up a date with Mary that night, but nothing ever came of it. The dealer kept his mouth shut, and even though they raided